In the meantime, just a couple of hours from now, big moves.
That's when President Obama is going to be making a nationwide address on his plans to expand America's military involvement in Afghanistan now and eventually get us out.
Senior Washington correspondent Peter Barnes is at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, where the president will be speaking. He joins us live with what we know so far. Peter.
That's right, David and Liz. That speech coming just 4 hours from now. President Obama to announce a major escalation of the war in Afghanistan, but also a framework for exiting the 8-year-old war. The administration officials telling Fox News that the president will announce that he has approved sending an additional 30,000 troops to Afghanistan in the next 6 months for a spring offensive against insurgents there, mainly in the east and south, and this would raise total U.S. force levels in Afghanistan to 100,000. The president will also ask NATO and other allies to send up to 10,000 more troops to Afghanistan, mainly for security assistance in Afghan population centers. He will also demand better governance and anti-corruption measures by the Afghan government itself, as well as call for an increase in Afghan security forces with performance benchmarks for both. He will also frame out, in general, a wind down and exit strategy with a goal, an initial goal of getting those 30,000 new troops back home by July 2011. The goal here, according to administration officials, to reverse the Taliban momentum, secure key population centers, train Afghans, and then and gradually transfer operations to Afghan forces. Now, of course, this will cost more money. We've heard the administration talk about $1 million per soldier, so we're talking about $30 billion here.
We are not going to, and we can't afford to, pretend that these wars do not cost money, whether it's in Iraq, whether it's in Afghanistan. Ending down our commitment in Iraq, we are going to announce a new strategy for Afghanistan, and this president will take into account in our budgeting how much it costs to do just that.
And we're also already seeing the fight beginning over exactly how to fund this additional money for this new surge in Afghanistan, whether or not to impose some kind of war surtax, as some Democrats in the House have proposed to. We heard a proposal today to use unspent stimulus money to fund this effort. There are also talks about cutting or freezing existing government spending, or Congress could just decide to add it to the deficit. David and Liz, back to you.
Thank you, Peter. Remember, our special coverage of the president's speech begins right here, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, with Neil Cavuto live, again, right here on Fox Business.
And at 6 p.m. Eastern, Neil is going to be talking with Dan Rather. He just returned from Afghanistan. Dan Rather will be talking to Neil about what exactly is going on the ground there.
Now, along with the human cost associated with an expanded war effort in Afghanistan, there, of course, is awfully a substantial dollar cost.
And some in D.C. are calling for a war tax to pay for it. Senator Jim Bunning joins us now to discuss that. Senator Bunning, what's your initial reaction to this tax?
Absolutely not. We paid for the war in Iraq and Afghanistan with supplemental appropriation bills. We are looking for a spring supplemental to do just that for this Afghan escalation of 30,000 additional troops. That's about $30 billion. And we have done it in the 2 wars that we have been in with supplementals, both under the Bush administration and under the current administration.
So you're saying that that works well enough and that we shouldn't have any kind of tax. I mean, of course, we don't know. There's no solid evidence at the moment that we would see that type of tax. But with supplementals, they add to the deficit anyway. In a way, there are some people who might say, yeah, we got to feel this a little bit more. We didn't feel the Iraq war. There was no war tax. Even Senator George Voinovich was saying that at the time, and he's a Republican.
Felt it. My grandchildren and my great-grandchildren will feel it. Believe me, Liz, when we get to the point that we have to pay for these things, there's going to be a large tax on my grandkids and my great-grandkids.
Well, Senator, what is the consensus, if there is any yet, as to whether a tax like this should be in place?
There is no consensus right now because it's a lot of hot air that the Democrats are proposing, because these are people who don't want to send any additional troops, that are the procrastination for 3 months by this president on whether or not to do it has cost additional lives of American people, American troops, both female and male, in Afghanistan. Well, as you well know, we have lost additional troops in the last 2 months, escalating the losses of American troops because we did not have enough people on the ground.
But Senator, there are some who very much believe that rushing into Iraq, where there was word of weapons of mass destruction, and in the end there were none, that too lost lives as well.
We didn't rush into Iraq. We rushed in to take care of those that had just bombed the Trade Center in New York, losing 3,000 Americans. The Pentagon, I live 1 mile from the Pentagon. I watched it burn.
Yes, but the Taliban was in Afghanistan. The Taliban was not in Iraq.
The Taliban and the Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda was using Iraq and Afghanistan as a training base. Al-Qaeda was responsible for the destruction of part of the Pentagon and all of the Trade Center. Now, what are we going to do? Sit back and say, oh, by the way, you terrorist, we're going to allow you to do this to our country?
No, he's adding 30,000 additional troops, Senator. He's adding 30,000 additional troops. That's the word tonight.
Thank God he's doing it after procrastinating for 3 months when all 4 U.S. generals said last April that we needed them.
Senator, it's not just the Democrats that are arguing that perhaps we have sufficient, or perhaps we should even pull out of Afghanistan. Some conservatives are saying, look, there is a very corrupt government in place in Afghanistan. Maybe all we need to be doing there is killing the bad guys with special forces, not policing the entire country.
We need, without any question, we need to help the Afghan government clean up itself. We cannot. Just like we did in Iraq. When we put the surge on in Iraq, we said to the Iraqi government, you've got to clean up your act or we're going to leave. And they did. And 3 unbelievable people got together. The Sunni, Shiite, and the Kurds all got together and cleaned up their act. And that is so essential to have a government you can rely on, and the people of Afghanistan that can rely on for lack of corruption. We know that's essential. And if you didn't have that and you didn't make that specific enough, this surge that we're doing in Afghanistan, the thing that bothers me more than anything is forward passing our possible withdrawal time to the Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, that we just might leave by July of 2011. You don't forward to the enemy a timetable for reduction
Senator Jim Bunning, we got to leave it at that, Senator. We'll invite you back to talk about Afghanistan soon, I promise. Thank you very much, Senator. Appreciate it.
No apologies.
You're welcome. Thank you.